NATO just threatened to punish India with 100% sanctions, and India's response shocked everyone. The world's largest democracy just told the Western military alliance to back off, warning against double standards while defending its right to buy Russian oil. This isn't just about energy, it's about a fundamental shift in global power that's happening right now. Here's what went down. On Tuesday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte delivered an ultimatum that sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. He warned India, China, and Brazil that if they continue buying Russian oil and gas, they'll face devastating secondary sanctions. His exact words, "If the man in Moscow doesn't take the peace negotiations seriously, I will impose 100% secondary sanctions." He said this would slam back on Brazil, on India, and on China in a massive way. India's response was swift and firm. Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randir Jaiswal didn't mince words. Securing energy needs of our people is understandably an overriding priority for us, he stated. But here's where it gets interesting. He added that India would particularly caution against any double standards on the matter. That double standards comment, it's a direct shot at Europe. See, while NATO's threatening India for buying Russian energy, several European countries are quietly planning to keep importing Russian gas until at least 2027. India's basically saying, don't lecture us while you're still doing business with Moscow yourselves. Oil Minister Hardeep Singh Puri was even more defiant. When asked about the sanctions threat, he simply said, "If something happens, we'll deal with it." He pointed out that India has already diversified its oil sources from 27 to 40 countries. The message is clear. India won't be bullied. To understand why this matters so much, you need to know how dramatically India's energy landscape has changed. Before Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, India bought almost no oil from Russia, less than 2% of total imports. Today, Russian oil makes up nearly 40% of India's crude imports. We're talking about 1.8 to 2 million barrels per day. The numbers are staggering. In 2024 alone, India spent over $50 billion on Russian oil. That's not pocket change. It's a lifeline for Russia's war economy, generating about $192 billion annually from oil exports. But for India, it's a lifeline too. The country imports 88% of its oil needs, and Russian crude comes at a significant discount, sometimes $10 to $15 cheaper per barrel than Middle Eastern oil. This isn't just about saving money, though that matters for a country with 1.4 billion people. It's about energy security. India's oil consumption is growing faster than any major economy. It's expected to account for 25% of global oil demand growth in 2025, surpassing even China. With the economy expanding and millions entering the middle class, India needs reliable, affordable energy sources. There's another layer to this story. India's worried about the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow waterway between Iran and Oman, where 20% of the world's oil passes through. With tensions between Israel and Iran escalating, and Iran threatening to close the strait, India can't put all its eggs in the Middle Eastern basket. Russian oil, which comes through different routes, the Pacific, the Suez Canal, or around Africa, provides crucial diversification. Trump's already given Russia a 50-day ultimatum to reach a peace deal with Ukraine or face those secondary tariffs. His new ambassador to NATO, Matt Whitaker, made it clear this isn't really about sanctioning Russia directly. He said it's about tariffs on countries like India and China that are buying their oil. The U.S. administration already hit Russia's oil industry hard before leaving office, sanctioning major producers like Gazprom Neft and Surgutneftegas, plus 183 vessels in Russia's shadow fleet. Indian banks are already getting nervous, with the State Bank of India and Punjab National Bank holding back payments to Russian exporters. But here's the thing. India's been preparing for this. The country is actively building what some call a sanctions-proof supply chain for Russian oil. Indian refiners are working with merchants, shippers, and middlemen to keep the oil flowing even if sanctions tighten. They've learned from Iran's playbook. When the U.S. sanctioned Iranian oil in 2019, India had to stop imports from what was then its third largest supplier. What makes this even more complex is that India doesn't just import Russian crude, it refines it and exports petroleum products back to the West, including G7 countries. 3 major Indian refiners handle more than half of Russian oil imports and then sell refined products globally. If secondary sanctions hit, these exports would become too expensive to compete, disrupting global fuel markets. The alternatives aren't great. India could pivot back to Middle Eastern suppliers like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iraq, but their oil is more expensive. Iraqi Basra crude trades around $76 per barrel compared to Russian Urals at 60 to 70. Plus, Iraq has limited spare capacity. India is also looking at newer suppliers like Brazil, Canada, Guyana, Nigeria, and Angola, but building those relationships and logistics takes time. The U.S. is pushing its own oil as an alternative. American crude exports to India jumped 51% in the first half of 2025, reaching 270,000 barrels per day. But there's a catch. U.S. oil is mostly light sweet crude, while Indian refineries are configured for the medium and heavy sour grades that Russia supplies. Switching would require expensive refinery modifications. This confrontation reveals a deeper shift in global politics. India, once firmly in the Western camp during the Cold War's later stages, is now asserting its strategic autonomy. The government's message is clear. India will act in its national interest, not according to Western dictates. As Jaiswal put it, India is guided by what is available in the markets and by prevailing global circumstances. The timing couldn't be worse for global oil markets. Crude prices already jumped to 5-month highs around $80 per barrel after the latest sanctions announcement. If India and China, which together buy about 85% of Russia's oil exports, suddenly stop purchasing, we could see a massive supply shock. Russia exports over 7 million barrels daily. Taking that off the market would send prices soaring, hurting everyone from American drivers to European manufacturers. Some analysts think Trump might not follow through on the 100% tariff threat. Richard Bronze from Energy Aspects notes that Trump's already issued an executive order allowing 25% tariffs on countries buying Venezuelan oil, but hasn't acted on it. The likelihood is that secondary tariffs are too disruptive for Trump to be willing to use, he suggests. Instead, we might see more targeted secondary sanctions, going after specific companies, banks, or individuals involved in the Russian oil trade rather than blanket tariffs on entire countries. That would still hurt, but might avoid a full-blown trade war with India and China. For India, this is more than oil. It's about not being forced to choose sides in a new Cold War. The country maintains strong defense ties with Russia. Moscow still supplies the bulk of India's military equipment. India also sees Russia as a potential counterweight to China, despite their no-limits partnership. Abandoning Russia now would leave India more isolated against its nuclear-armed neighbor. What happens next depends on multiple factors. If Russia doesn't agree to peace talks within Trump's 50-day ultimatum, we'll see if he follows through on the tariff threat. India's already signaling it won't back down easily. The country's message to NATO and the U.S. is clear. We'll secure our energy needs our way, and threatening us won't change that. This standoff could reshape global energy markets and international relations. It shows the limits of Western sanctions when major economies refuse to play along. It also reveals how the Ukraine war has accelerated the shift to a multipolar world where countries like India chart their own course. For now, Russian oil keeps flowing to Indian ports, refined in Indian facilities, and sometimes shipped back to Western markets. It's a strange dance of economic interdependence that no one seems able or willing to stop. The question is whether this fragile balance can hold, or if we're heading for a major disruption that'll hit gas prices and economies worldwide. One thing is certain. India's firm rejection of NATO's threats marks a new chapter in global politics. When the world's largest democracy tells the West's premier military alliance to check its double standards, it's clear the old order is changing. What comes next will shape not just energy markets, but the entire international system for years to come. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.